Hello and welcome to the SBK Betting Podcast. Jess Stafford is off duty this week, so I'll be stepping in to host and also hopefully provide some winners along the way. I'm joined by SBK Betting Podcast regular Ross Millar, who put up 20-1 Beecher Chase third percussion last week. Very nice each-way return there, Ross. My Nat Broadway boy also went in at 5-2, which is good. And I gave a good shout out as well to Ashtown Lad, who won the Beecher very impressively for the Skeltons. So we had a decent day all in all between us at Aintree. Ross, firstly, how are you? Have you avoided the latest influx of the lurgy, as I've unfortunately succumbed to it?
Yeah, I had a bit of a cough actually over the weekend, and I've shaken it off pretty quick. I've been flying a fair bit, which I don't think helps the immune system all that well. But I'm in pretty good form and better than you by the sounds of things.
Well, yeah, you do sound in good shape, to be fair. Hopefully, you continue to bypass the illnesses. One thing I don't want to be bypassing this week is jumps racing. There's a threat that we won't have any jumps racing due to the wintry conditions, lots of frost about, plenty of racing called off midweek. Cheltenham, they're looking to inspect on Friday, probably again on Saturday, but hopefully it gets the go-ahead, because if Cheltenham doesn't go ahead, then it looks likely to be a pretty poor week on the racing front. Nevertheless, if it does go ahead, we have the December Gold Cup at Cheltenham. One of the very few races this Saturday, actually, that looked competitive. I think 15 runners currently declared, 11-2 the favourite right now in Il Ridoto. Ross, I went back and watched the podcast for this race last year. I unfortunately wasn't on it. I think it was yourself, Jess, and James Millman. You gave a really good shout out to Cool Cody, but you changed your mind and went with Sierra Delac. Cool Cody went on to win the race. Firstly, are you over that decision yet? Secondly, who do you like in this year's renewal?
Uh, am I over it? Yeah, I get past things pretty quick. I was really disappointed with Sierra Delac that day. I just remember he just never raised the gallop. I was bitterly disappointed. Cool Cody is one of those horses that actually, even if you haven't got your money down on him, if he wins, you can't help but break into a bit of a smile. As for this year, it's a bit of a changing of the guard, really, isn't it? Because a lot of the old favourites that have run in this sort of race for the last 2 or 3 years aren't there. I've come down on two. Warlord, I think, has just been crying out for this step up in trip. Runs off a mark of 148 after getting dropped a pound for perhaps a below par run in the Holden Gold Cup last time. I thought he got outpaced and was actually making pretty good, steady inroads into the leading two when he made a mistake, and that sort of put paid to any chance he had. Stayed on quite nicely. His form over hurdles, admittedly starting off a fairly low mark of 120, he improved about a stone for stepping up from 2 mile to trips of sort of around about 2 mile 3, 2 mile 4. I don't think he's going to improve that much because he's running off a higher mark already. He's clearly a better chase than he was hurdler. But I think if he can improve a bit for this step up in trip, which I think he will, I think he's got a great chance. And his career best piece of form came at Cheltenham. Now that was on the old course, and we're now on the new course, which is a bit more of a stamina test, and that was over 2 miles in the Arkle. But that form received a really big boost last week with Edwardstone winning the Tingle Creek in impressive fashion. He was 10 lengths behind Edwardstone, staying on really well to the line. I think off a mark of 148, he's got a great chance back up in trip. And then the other one I do really like, I mentioned him on our Ultimate podcast previewing the season. It's a horse I really like. It's Fugitive. Now he steps up to 2 mile 4 for the first time in a race that was winnable. He did run over 2 mile 4 around Sandown last year, but the yard was out of form and it was a very hot race won by L'Empresse. He made a really nice reappearance run at Cheltenham, tracing home a Colin Tizard horse, Amarillo Sky. Joe Tizard horse, Amarillo Sky. Better not get that wrong. Amarillo Sky has since come out and won again at Newbury in really good fashion. Now, Amarillo Sky's now 151. Fugitive was getting £9, but he was only beaten a length. He got outpaced down the hill, again on the sharper old course. Hung a little bit up the straight, but stayed on really well and was closing right the way to the line. Runs here off a mark of 133. And I'll just give you 2 bits of form from last year. Now, he was a bit in and out last year, but we've mentioned on the podcast a couple of times that Richard Hobson's yard in general was. But his first run out over Worcester, he beat the 117 rated across the line by 10 lengths. It could have been 110 lengths. You will never see an easier winner of a chase. Then didn't run well at Haydock, but actually got struck into. Then third run back at Newcastle was a really cosy 4-length winner from Dream of Homes, who's 135 rated. Runs off 133 here. He has been crying out for this step up in trip. I'd be a little bit more confident if the ground was just a touch softer. The good ground does slightly temper enthusiasm, but around about, I think he was 14, 16 to 1 when I last looked. I think he's got a massive chance. Keelan Woods has ridden him to victory before, rode him last time. He clearly handles this track. I think he's got outstanding credentials.
Yeah, so Warlord is 6-1 currently. Fugitive is 16-1, as you touched on there, both with SBK. I respect both of those selections. I really did look into Warlord and thought he could have been one of my picks in here, but he was probably the last off my shortlist, the third most likely winner, in my opinion. But I completely respect him. I think he'll run a great race. My number one pick is going to be Il Ridoto. Now, you've already touched on the Ultimate Jumps preview podcast that we filmed at the start of the jump season, so I'm going to mention it again. If you haven't checked this out, by the way, make sure you go on a YouTube or a Spotify. The video's up there now, and you can see what we think of all the major races throughout the season and our horses to follow, jockeys to follow, etc. Loads of stuff in there. But a horse I put up as my horse to follow in that podcast was Il Ridoto. Now, he also runs in this race, much like Ross's Fugitive. Il Ridoto ran at Cheltenham's November meeting. I thought he had a great chance that day. I went down to Cheltenham to watch because I was confident he was going to be bang there. I actually had a pretty successful day, bit of classic after time in there. But unfortunately, Il Ridoto wasn't one of the winners. He finished fourth. Thought he ran a great race, though. He travelled really well. He turned in for home looking like the most likely winner and just kind of blew up the hill. He didn't have the speed of the first three that day, but he ran really well. First run back from wind surgery. Now we see him again at Cheltenham. And I said in that podcast, if Il Ridoto runs at Cheltenham in a big field handicap, then I will be backing him this season. So guess what? I'm going in again. There is no reason why I shouldn't. I think he's still well treated. Paul Nicholls does fantastically well with all of his horses, but specifically chasers. So Il Ridoto is my number one selection, but he's likely to be favourite in this race, albeit around 5-1, 11-2 mark. So I thought I'd go in with a second selection as well, which is Ferrero Bamboo. Now, Venetia Williams trains Ferrero Bamboo. She has been firing on all cylinders over the last 2 months. She's already had 4 winners in December at the time of filming. I think she had 8 in November as well. Really good strike rate. Ferrero Bamboo has run twice this year, both at Ascot in competitive races. Last time up, showed good speed, jumped really well, but got done for a little bit of toe over in an inadequate trip, 2 mile 1 furlongs. Now steps up in trip, which I think will see him in better light, and he'll have no issues with the ground whatsoever, given he's run on good ground the last twice. Okay, on to our naps, Ross. Fortunately, we are both present in the WhatsApp group, so I managed to see your nap before we're filming this podcast, and I have to say, given the inside track on this, I love your pick. Tell everyone who it is.
Oh, I'm glad you agree, TC. This horse really caught my eye last time, so it's we've all been caught. Nigel Twiston-Davies caught my eye really for a lot of wrong reasons. I mean, his jumping, it looked like he'd never seen a hurdle. Actually, he was ballooning them. He was very guessy, and it was in a race where there was a lot of pace up front. And Sam Twiston-Davies, I think, had to put him under more pressure at a point of the race when he really didn't want to, and his jumping slightly fell apart. He just looks a bit slow, in truth. That was over 2 mile 5. Again, as we've been talking, on the old course, much sharper. Now steps up to 3 miles on the new course. I think that's going to suit him really, really well. He stayed on. I mean, he looked like he was going to fall at the back of the telly at the top of the hill. Stayed on, beaten 10 lengths. The winner, I think, is a very useful horse, and he was making great inroads up the hill. I was a little bit disappointed looking at the opening market that I slightly thought the Paul Nicholls trained Outlaw Pete might take a bit more of the market with being a Paul Nicholls Saturday horse. I thought there might be a slight closeness in the price, and there's not at the moment. But I think this horse is absolutely cut out for 3 miles. It's got really good bumper form, winning at Newbury. The runner-up collector's item won over hurdles first time. The 4th place, Firestream, he absolutely bolted up first time over hurdles at Chepstow by something like 20 lengths. I think that form looks solid enough. I think he's going to take a big step forward, particularly with his jumping. I'm sure he'll have done plenty of schooling since that debut run, and I think he's going to take all the beating, albeit at a slightly skinny price.
Yeah, we've all been caught 13-8 currently with SBK. I imagine he'll go off shorter. I think he should be favourite in the race, despite the fact that Paul Nicholls has a decent unexposed runner at the top of the market currently in the anti-post markets. Surprisingly enough, and I think this is a first actually, Ross, I'm agreeing with you with our naps. My nap also on Saturday is we've all been caught in the 3 o'clock at Cheltenham. I won't bore you with the form that Ross has just brilliantly told you the ins and outs of. I think he has great form. That run at Cheltenham the other day when he was third to Hermes Allen was very creditable. That was, again, a day that I was there, and I tipped him because I thought he was going to run a good race. Nigel Twiston-Davies previously said that he thought this was a Gold Cup horse for the future. Now, the trip would have never suited if that's the case. It was 2.5 miles, but he stayed on up the hill, as Ross touched on, really powerfully. He was a huge eye catcher. What I will add that Ross didn't mention is the fact that trainers are creatures of habit. When a trainer has gone a route before with a smart horse, they will go that route again. Nigel Twiston-Davies has targeted this race in the past. Ever since 2014, he's targeted this race. He's won it with Black Lion. He's won it with Holstone. He's actually won it on 3 occasions and had 2 placed runners. I think he tends to run his future star chasers in this race over hurdles just to prove that they can get the trip. We've all been caught. We'll love the step up in distance, as Ross touched on, and I really think he is the best bet of the day. Now, it's time for the next best. I really struggled with this section, I have to admit. But Ross, you said you had one.
Yeah, I do. He's a bit of a cliff horse, actually, but I love him. It's the Nicky Richards trained Marone, who runs in the 205 at Doncaster. He just absolutely disappeared last season, having had a really promising novice chase season, winning 2 races. And then last year, it just, for whatever reason, didn't happen. On his debut, he ran abysmally, and it didn't get much better. I think he only ran 3 times. But he returned this year over 2 mile 4 air and looked much, much more like it. Finished just behind Alveston Mail, who's run since. He's now rated 141. He was getting £4. He was beaten just over a length. Now steps back up to 3 miles on good ground on a galloping track. He's £7 below his last winning mark. If he's back to the sort of form he was in as a novice chaser, he's absolutely chucked in. Like I said, he has been a bit of a cliff horse for me. He can win this, and I think I'll still be in a net loss situation with him. But Brian Hughes is on board, rode him last time. You know what it's like on a Saturday up north. Brian Hughes can pick what he wants to ride. I think it's notable that he's chosen Marone, and I'd be really keen to see this horse get back on track.
Yeah, Marone is a 5-time winner from 13 career starts, despite his recent form figures looking a bit off, as Ross has just touched on there. But he's got good back form in the book and represents an informed team. No price currently on him at the time of filming on Thursday, but I'm sure he's going to be around the top of the market, having looked at the current field and the fact that I think 3 of the runners are also engaged elsewhere. My next best, as I say, I struggled in this area. I thought the racing was pretty poor on Saturday, Cheltenham aside, and we've already touched on the Nap and the main race. So I looked at the all-weather because, I love flat racing. And the 4 o'clock at Newcastle, a horse called Cariad Angel was the horse I came down on. This is a bad race, right? But at the same time, this 2-year-old filly ran on soft grounds on her first 2 starts, so you can put a line through those efforts. Last time out on the all-weather, finished a really good second to a horse trained by William Haggis called 9 Tenths. That horse is well capable of running in top handicaps next year, maybe even a listed or a group race as well. Cariad Angel just drew miles clear of the rest of the field. In fact, she was 5 lengths clear of the third, who is rated 69. Cariad Angel has been given a handicap mark of 73, which is fair enough. And I think with the small field, she can perhaps dominate from the front and win this race. Now, we end this show with a stat attack, as per usual. The wintry weather has left our jumps racing in doubt, as we've touched on. So I'll stick to the all-weather for this as well. Now, Roger Varian has a 27% strike rate at Wolverhampton this year, 11 winners from 41 runners. Just 1 runner on Saturday, and that is Manafith. He goes in the 550 at Wolverhampton. He's 3 from 3 on the all-weather. He's probably going to go off favourite. Jim Crowley goes to Wolverhampton just for this ride. But if you love a stat attack, then don't look anywhere other than Manafith at Wolverhampton. A reminder that new SBK customers can bet £10 and get £30 in free bets. T's and C's always apply. Please remember to subscribe and view all of our great content. Visit betting.getsbk.com as well to read our articles, lots of tips on there for the World Cup and horse racing and NFL if you like your American sports too. And whack the like button as well if you're watching this on YouTube. Best of luck this weekend, Ross, and to all you listeners at home as well. Hopefully we have some racing to watch. Be lucky.